Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss progress being made with cloud computing at the Department of Defense. With me today on the show are Frank Konieczny, the Chief Technology Officer, U.S. Air Force, John Hale, Chief of the DISA Cloud Portfolio, Ralph Liberati, the Chief Capability Integration and Management Officer at Defense Intelligence Agency, Tom Simmons, the Area Vice President, Citrix Public Sector, AJ LaForty, the Cloud Security and Operations Federal Product Account Manager at BMC Software, and Scot, Susi, the Director of U.S. Defense Sales, Nutanix Federal. Let's get into the program. Let's start with Frank Konieczny over at the Air Force. Frank, cloud's come a long way over the last 12 years we've been doing this program. Give us some idea where you are in terms of progress at the Air Force working the cloud issues.
Well, we are making some progress, which is good.
That's always good.
We have two things already as software as a service. We have our MilPers system, which is our military personnel system out in the cloud already. And we also have Office 365 right now that we're trying out. So we have two software as a services. We also have multiple applications now and infrastructure as a service capabilities, a lot of those logistics applications that we're currently moving over. We're actually using some of the platform capabilities of some of the vendors as an experimentation to see if we want to use that or not, or how we can migrate across, and if there's any differences between what we have and what the platforms provide for us. We're also doing a bunch of DevOps models now. We're trying to actually move into that philosophy of doing it quickly and doing it fast,
agile,
and moving forward. And we actually have established now a set of contractors that actually are doing the migration for us now. So as we go forward, that is probably our plan, is to do the migration with some help, because you have to do some engineering analysis, which we have been negligent in doing a lot of this because it takes a long time. And we're progressing now in that way so we can go forward with all the clouds.
Very cool. Pretty soon it's going to be like everything as a service. I mean, it started as like software as a service, now infrastructure. Somebody's going to come up with, let's just have everything as a service. Ralph Liberati at DIA, tell us a little bit about the progress you see there being made in the movement to the cloud.
Well, thank you, Jim. Our progress has been remarkable over the last 3 years. We've migrated and have up and running in various security enclaves over 1,500 virtual servers and systems. We take advantage of all the services that we can provided by our providers. And the nice part about it is we work from the unclassified all the way up to the top secret levels.
Wow.
And we have three major environments that we run: our development environment, our production test, and our production environment. And the beauty of that is that we can simulate and have exact same hardware and characteristics across each one of them. So predictability is there, and we can test and evaluate and deliver in a much more rapid fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know years ago when we did the program, we talked with the DoD, there was the idea that administrative systems would likely go to cloud pretty soon, but there was some question about classified products and things like that. And the discussion then was, it's just an evolutionary thing. It'll probably happen, just take a little longer. AJ LaForty at BMC Software, how are you supporting your clients, and what kind of progress are you seeing as people moving to the cloud?
We're seeing a lot of great progress in a lot of the federal customers moving to the cloud, but one of the key areas where BMC is helping out is in security. We're trying to ensure that, whether it's an infrastructure as a service offering, or whether it's platform as a service, or we're looking at S3 storage containers in AWS, RDS, the ability to be able to ensure that we're following state policies across all these different technologies from cradle to grave. So being able to ensure that everything's secure from day one all the way through with the consumption of these new technologies. Also, we're really focusing on ensuring customers' cloud cost. So that way, we're not provisioning or over-consuming services from these public cloud vendors, and we're not as taxpayers, we're not paying too much money for systems that we're consuming and utilizing. So BMC is helping us understand, helping our customers understand what they're actually utilizing, how much they're using, being able to map it out and being able to control the cost of what they're consuming.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear about that emphasis on security, because again, in the early days with cloud, everyone was worried about security. And then my argument always was, well, you can actually start from scratch and actually get an idea where you are, because we've been band-aiding things for years and years and years. Now you have an opportunity to take a holistic approach to it. Scot, Susi at Nutanix, how are you supporting your customers, and what kind of progress are you seeing in the movement to the cloud?
Yeah, so with our customers, we're seeing a lot. The first thing that we're seeing is increasing the efficiencies of the data center. So one of the big differences that you would have seen several years ago between the data centers of the DoD and the data centers of the public cloud providers are how many administrators it takes to really, they've got racks and racks and racks and racks a year with 1, 2, 3 administrators tops. The federal government, what you would see is, potentially hundreds of administrators. So the first thing that we've done is reduce the complexity in the data center, where you can achieve the same efficiencies and have 2, 3 administrators versus 100 administrators. Second thing is using a software-defined data center where you can actually take advantage of the technologies that Silicon Valley is introducing as they're introducing it. So with one click, you can get a new technology within an on-prem cloud, much like you can when you go to an off-prem cloud.
Cool.
So those are the types of things that...
Yeah, very cool. The kids, when they come into the workforce, they're going to expect that.
Absolutely.
One click, have a new app up and running the next day. It just dawned on me as you were talking, this management act, the technology, if it actually passes, when it looks like it might, well, it'll be a $3 billion fund. That'll be an opportunity where you can borrow from and then pay back. I mean, redefining an entire environment into a cloud environment and reduce cost and then pay the fund back could be an interesting concept if it passes. Tom Simmons, Citrix. Tom, tell us how the progress you're seeing with the movement to cloud.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. So a lot of what we're seeing in the work that we're doing with DoD is similar to what the government's already talked about. A lot of workloads moving from data center to the cloud in an effort to either to increase capacity or increase the flexibility of access for those applications or particular workloads. And then the other area is just in horizontal kind of solutions. Mr. Kaczynski talked about the Office 365. A lot of the work that we're doing here at Citrix is migrating applications from Microsoft that have been hosted by Citrix in an application virtualization solution to now hosting those applications in the cloud, and we provide front-end authentication and the enhanced security.
Which is where I identify with Citrix.
Exactly, and that's where we see the future going.
John Hale, clearly DISA is a major player in all this, in terms of when we talk defense cloud, you got to, first comes to mind is DISA playing a huge role there. What kind of progress are you making over at DISA?
So DISA is a little bit of a different animal in the fact that we're not really cloud consumers for the most part. We're cloud providers, right? So we kind of have two focuses. One is working closely with our DoD mission partners, is making sure that we provide both on-prem and off-prem commercial cloud capabilities to them so that they can complete their mission. So we focused primarily on two areas over the last year. It's been in the form of MilCloud 2.0, which is our new on-prem commercial cloud capability, where we're bringing a commercial cloud provider into our DoD data centers to run cloud capabilities inside the fence. And then also an effort which we call SCCA, or our Secure Cloud Computing Architecture, which is really about putting the right pipes and security measures in place so that DoD mission partners can leverage off-prem commercial cloud in a safer, secure fashion than what they've done in the past, so with much bigger pipes. So both of those are in the implementation phase right now, and both of them are going to be IOC in January of 2018. So we're really, really close to hitting that finish line there.
Wow,
So.
good job. Things are happening a lot faster too. That's encouraging. I remember, those days of certification and accreditations would take forever. New generations of technology be out before you can even get around to getting something out there. So it's nice that they're getting to that capability sooner. Let's talk about a specific program. It's easy to identify if you talk about cloud, but you talk about a program where you think cloud's really going to make a difference and help. Let's start with Ralph Liberati at DIA. If I ask you, Ralph, to pick a program you think will really make a difference by going to the cloud, what comes to mind?
We just had a very substantial success. We implemented an intelligence application into the cloud, and when we did so, we were able to get with specificity performance metrics and monitoring, and we were able to analyze that the performance, we had overdriven in processors and put less in the RAM that we needed to do in one of the characteristics. So we were able to very quickly make a switch within the cloud by changing the configuration types, and saved money on the hosting costs. Sure. But also, you have to remember that the software is also driven by the processors, by the processor count in some cases. And so by reducing the processor size, we also saved on the software. So it was a double savings by being able to be flexible and agile. Where in before, in the government, we would purchase the equipment, we would own the equipment, we wouldn't have that flexibility.
Right.
So this was a major savings and a major advantage for
Yeah,
us.
it does sort of like set up, because you don't want to move your existing old stuff to the cloud. So what you have is an opportunity to modernize and get advanced analytics and metrics and really a lot more intelligence into your environment in terms of what you're doing. John Hale, what do you think in terms of, I asked you to pick a program that you see across the DoD that you think is really going to benefit from moving to the cloud?
So I don't know if it's any one particular program. We've been working very closely with U.S. Transcom out at Scot Air Force Base. And General McDew at Transcom has implemented a cloud it or kill it program, right? So basically everything within their data center, they're going through one by one, and they're making the move. It either moves to the cloud or they're turning it off. And he has put a very tight deadline on when that's happening, right?
this.
So basically, by May of next year, they have to be complete. They have to be completely out of their data center.
Cloud it or kill it.
Cloud it or kill it.
I love having you on the show. You always give me phrases I can plagiarize in future shows and sound really cool.
But the point there is, it takes senior leadership. I mean, that came from top down,
Yeah.
and that's senior leadership. Saying this is the future, and we're not gonna mess around, and we're just gonna go full bore. So
I like that. I like that a
That's
lot.
really
Good, very good story. True story. Frank, what do you think? What program comes to mind do you think really will make a difference by going to the cloud?
Well, it was MilPERS last year. This year,
Okay.
it's going to be the Air Operations Center. And what we've done in the Air Operations Center is that we've actually taken one of the applications. It really wasn't an application, it was a whiteboarding exercise. It was for tanker refueling scheduling. They actually had to do this by hand because they had the capability to actually not do it by hand. And so we used the DevOps model with military personnel as well as contractor personnel and developed a brand new application and fielded it within less than, I say 3 months, 4 months.
Excellent.
And therefore we went much farther with it. And now it's resilient, it's actually running in the AOCs now. It's a resilient system, it's for mission requirements, and they're actually talking about now adding another capability on top of it now, because this is refueling, and then so they're going to try to interface now with the other operation centers
Right.
to make sure that it's across all operation centers.
Yes, it's kind of like hardly anything is like, okay, we got it going now, so let's have the party and say we're accomplished. It seems to be continuous improvement and evolution moving along as these programs roll out. Tom Simmons over at Citrix, what program comes to mind that you think you'd highlight as one where the cloud's going to make a big difference?
So I think the transformational program that we're involved in right now is the ICDTE. The work that BAE is doing to host and secure a workspace for everybody in the community. We're a significant part of that. And the concept is to have everybody come to a hosted work environment where desktop, application, all of the IT resources are hosted in the cloud or have access to a workspace that's hosted in the cloud. So it truly is the integration of cloud technologies, on-prem technologies, and the connectors that go between that.
Excellent. Scott, Susi, what do you think? What comes to mind of a program that you'd highlight?
So
Say
there's
that
not-
there's a program to make a big difference by going to the cloud.
Right, so I can think of several, but
Pick your favorite.
there's a couple of common themes that we've seen with two of our major multi-tenant cloud providers. So these are DoD cloud providers that service multiple joint tenants that come to their cloud. And in the days of old, what would happen is a tenant would come to that cloud provider and they'd say, all right, we want you to support our application, and here's the hardware we want you to run it on. Now what we're seeing is the cloud providers and the DoD have built on-prem clouds with cloud technology, and they said, bring us your application and we're going to put it in our cloud, and we're gonna suck it in, consume it, and put it in our infrastructure, and you will consume it as a service. So what that's provided is the ability for those cloud providers to be much more responsive, so they can take on more applications much more quickly, instead of a year-long cycle of trying to re-engineer the entire hardware solution, how they're going to support it. It's, again, going back to the iPhone analogy, I just want to be able to pick an application and run it either on my iPhone or my Android or whatever. It's the same thing in the data center. You have an application of choice. You want to run it in your data center.
Excellent. It's amazing to me just how far we have come. I mean, back when we started talking cloud 12 years ago, people thought maybe it's just hype, fad. We've been there, done that. It'll just be another one of those things. But boy, hearing all the things that have evolved and all the things you guys are doing is pretty impressive. AJ LaForty, if I asked you to, what program comes to mind? Could something kick out that you would like to identify as a program really going to benefit from?
Yeah, there's
cloud?
a customer of ours in the space that has gotten some extreme value out of BMC solutions, and what they've done is they've actually not boiled the ocean. They've decided to look at and focus on key specific issues, and utilizing BMC's technologies, they've been able to automate 90% of their use cases. So what they're looking at is their standardized infrastructure as a service, software as a service solutions are being provided out to multiple organizations within themselves to be able to both provision on-prem and in the cloud, based upon the type of technology or what they're going to be utilizing or consuming. If they know it's going to contain PII, they're hosting it internal. If it's not going to, or other things, they are pushing it out to public cloud. On top of that, we're delivering the services to them STIG'd, compliant, patched on day one, and then the consumer of the service is no longer having to maintain security. The cloud provider is taking care of that for them.
Right.
So they know that every third Saturday of every month, on the third Saturday, it will be patched, it will be compliant, and it will be validated. And they'll get weekly updates of the security of their systems.
Excellent. You brought up the not boil the ocean thing, and I think I've already heard from almost all of you. DevOps, agile, piecemeal. I think we've learned in government over the years, the Big Bang Theory, build the project that's going to be delivered in 5 years kind of thing isn't the way to go anymore. It's build it by piece, and I think cloud really helps that. We need to talk about some of the lessons we're learning and some of the challenges and where this is all going down the road. But first, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Frank Konieczny from the U.S. Air Force, John Hale from DISA, Ralph Liberati from DIA, Tom Simmons from Citrix Public Sector, AJ LaForty from BMC Software, and Scott Susi from Nutanix Federal. We're talking defense cloud computing, and when we went to break, we had heard about some progress being made. We heard about some programs that are exciting. Now let's talk about sort of like the mechanics and what needs to be done and some of the things you're doing. A lot of people listen to the program, they like to hear about, how have you done this? What are some lessons learned maybe you'd like to pass on to those listening to the show that might help them with their programs? Start with John Hale over at DISA. John, what would come to mind with some lessons learned as you've migrated to the cloud with these programs?
So I talked a little bit earlier about U.S. Transcom's efforts, their cloud it or kill it model, and that really highlights kind of the big area of concern that I think a lot of mission partners have towards moving towards the cloud, and that's really how do you do app rationalization? How do you go through your individual applications, your legacy applications that you have today, and determine which ones should move to the cloud, which ones can move to the cloud, which ones need to be modernized as part of that effort, and then ultimately which ones need to be retired. And it's a costly, time-intensive process that most people don't calculate into the overall effort of migrating to the cloud. And it's difficult because you're talking about people's babies, right?
Yeah.
Pet projects.
Oh, absolutely.
Pet projects that they've owned and operated for years.
That's right.
And then now you have to make really hard decisions. And they have to be business decisions, and it's a difficult thing to do, and it's something that we see more and more focus across the department on, is really on how do you do the app rationalization directly related to moving things to the cloud. There's no silver bullet, right? There's no Excel spreadsheet that fixes everything, and so it is something that has to be looked at on an individual application by application process. So.
That's very important, getting the inventory and understanding what you have. And, you know, in some cases probably, we don't even really need to have this anymore. We can include it with something else or redesign it, so forth. Excellent points. Frank, how about at Air Force? What are some of the lessons learning as you're moving programs to the cloud?
As John said, basically, you have to do an inventory. However, we could not wait to do the entire inventory for all the applications in the Air Force because we'd be waiting forever.
I bet there's a few.
3,000 or 4,000. So the idea is to start progressing. You can bin some of the applications you know already, but you have to progress, you know, and start migrating some of the applications with the facts and knowledge that you may be migrating an application that you may later get rid of.
Right.
But you just have to take some of those chances and do your best guess. But besides that, you have to do, besides the binning into is this cloud ready or is this not cloud ready, you have to do an engineering analysis of those applications. Because many applications are linked to other applications, especially like logistics are linked all over the place. And so if you move one application over to a cloud, you better understand that your data transmission costs between all the other applications that are sitting somewhere, maybe back in the Air Force, maybe in other commercial clouds, is going to probably cause lots of problems and delays in your actual operations. And so you have to realize that as you go forward. And also you have to figure out that how are you going to be able to do this? I mean, we've had a monumental problem of having all the PEOs trying to figure out how to migrate applications.
Right.
And so we came to that philosophy that we have to have migration as a service, basically.
Right.
That there has to be somehow, and Transcom is actually doing that too, that you have to have some way of pushing the applications out there.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand that there is a contractual issue here.
Yeah, it's true too. I mean, we'll probably get to that when we get to challenges.
Yes, we'll get to challenges, but that's another issue.
Yeah, excellent point. And it's so right about the interactions in engineering, and it's like change management. You know, you got to be careful. You do one change here, it can ricochet across a whole, or supply chain. I know back in the days when I was Treasury, we used to have studies done on how dependent we are on outside suppliers and supply chains, and how a change, let's say at an IRS, how it ricochets across the community, and just how substantial the impacts can be. Ralph Liberati, when it comes to lessons learned, what are some of the things you're saying, I wish I knew that before I started, I may have done it a little different, or something you thought was you'd like to pass on to others?
Well, I'd like to pass on that, you know, in the government, we're a little bit different. We have programmatics are different in the government. It's not like a corporation or a business. We have different appropriation laws and rules and regulations. Right. So to start us on our journey, we started and built a cloud broker team that helps tenants and customers with this process. It goes through a business process, and it determines, do they have funding, how will they be charged, what cleanse, what types of collection mechanisms, because remember, cloud's built on a monthly basis, and the government's not generally geared to bill itself or collect funding internally on a monthly basis. Right. So the development of that cloud broker team to help shepherd those customers with their accounts, help them in that transition period, and get them familiar with the do's and don'ts of working in a cloud environment has been very advantageous to us. We're fortunate, and we've got a great partnership with our vendors who were able to help us through that transition. Yeah,
good point there, right there, partnerships, and working closely with your contractors. Talking about our contractors, AJ, LaForty, what are some of the lessons learned as you've worked through and helped your customers with the cloud migrations?
One of the big things I like to bring up is if you give a developer access to a public cloud and let them provision whatever they want, they're going to over-provision, they're going to consume a lot of resources, they're going to consume a lot of cost. And so one thing that we've learned is we need to appropriately wrap ITIL processes and business processes around the requesting, the provisioning, and the consumption of cloud services. If you don't do that, it's going to end up being more expensive than just hosting stuff locally on-prem. So make sure we tie that stuff around for the consumption of the provisioning and the consumption. And then also making sure that we look at understanding the security profiles of new offerings that are becoming available. If we look at FedRAMP public clouds available, the standard things available are infrastructure as a service, your standard Windows, Linux, things along those lines. But Amazon, for example, is providing a lot of new capabilities to customers, such as database services, containerization technologies, and understanding how to secure those is completely different and requires a different skill set. So being able to provide tools and technology for anyone to be able to harden and ensure that those other technologies, as they're becoming available in the cloud, are being able to be consumed in a secure manner.
Cool. Very cool. I think security is a good lesson learned. I mean, we've learned security the hard way over the years by not building it in up front and then having to suffer the consequences and the cost of building it in later. Scott, Susi, how about lessons learned is that from your perspective as these programs move to the cloud?
Absolutely. So, kind of keeping on the security topic, one of the things that we realized early on was that security is an absolute necessary component of building an on-prem cloud. But it's extremely time-consuming.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that we did was to basically pre-stig every single one of our appliances before it goes out the door. So whether you're Ford Motor Company or Department of Defense, when you receive one of our appliances, it's already pre-stigged the entire cloud stack. But beyond that, in the DoD, you go through a process where you credit an application stack. It happens at that point in time. If somebody goes in and they update the software, they have to change a root password, do something like that, essentially what happens is if they forget to go back in and erase their tracks, you're now vulnerable to any type of a malicious attack.
Sure.
So what we've then done is automated the security process. So once you establish your baseline for what, how do you ensure the security of your stack, you can do it every 10 minutes, every day, every month. It goes through, it checks the baseline, and then it will self-remediate. So if somebody changed that root password, it will change it back automatically. If somebody opens a port, it will close that port. So these are all things that continuously keep your cloud secure. So one of our customers, actually a U.S. Marine Corps customer, did a study and they figured that per application they saved about $150,000 in man hours per application per year in not having to do this as a manual process.
Yeah. Wow. I wonder if I accidentally picked up that particular code because my phone works sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think there's something inside there turning on things on and off. Tom Simmons, what's some of the lessons learned you'd like to pass on as you've worked through these programs for many years?
So our mission at Citrix has always been the secure delivery of apps and data,
security
right?
is music to your ears.
And when we talk about applications, I think when Mr. Hale talks about an app rationalization and understanding what's in the inventory, and then which applications can be just rehosted in a cloud infrastructure on an infrastructure as a service kind of offering, which can be migrated to a commercial or government developed SaaS offering, a true cloud service. And then finally, with a focus on outcomes, why does this application exist? What is it that I'm trying to get out of it? Not unlike the tanker refueling application.
Right.
What are the outcomes that I'm looking for? And what we're seeing is that born in the cloud apps, applications that are written with the intent of being hosted and delivered from the cloud, leveraging all the flexibility in terms of endpoints and resources around the world, truly tend to be better able to leverage the benefits of the cloud and give us the kind of flexibility that we're looking for from a user and a performance perspective, while maintaining that central visibility, manageability, and security that IT needs to make sure that the app's doing what it's intended to do and the user's able to get their job done the most efficient way.
Well said. I like that focus on results, focus on what do we want to get out of this? Right. What does the result look like? And the fact that it's, John brought it up too, it's a business decision. It's not just a technology decision. You need to make some strong business decisions there. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges, the hard things, the constraints, the things that you really need to work through to get where you really want to be with all these programs. Start with you, Frank. Frank Konieczny, what are some of the challenges, the hard things to do in order to get to where you want to go with these programs?
All right, we started a little bit. The contractual issues. All the applications are usually maintained by some contractor.
Right.
And therefore you have to plan when you want to move an application to a cloud, especially if the contractor is supposed to take care of that movement, or you have a migration agent that is moving that for you. The question is liability at some point in time, of who is liable for any changes that are with a new application in the cloud. And then it also goes down to budgeting. since the budgeting process,
Money always figures in.
it always does, because, how do you budget for this? That's always been a question. Do you budget, our PROM process says you budget out. Well, it's very difficult for them to budget out because they have no idea how much it's going to cost them to run in a cloud now. They can assume it's going to be the same, but since there's also lots of fixed costs that we already absorb at the Air Force, basically where they're sitting,
Right.
it's very difficult for them to determine how much it's going to be, and that's
good
been a
point.
problem
I
all
thought
along.
And I'm sure service level agreements and things like that are all different in cloud than they were traditionally.
Everyone. And one of the other problems is also security. Is how do you get an ATO fast enough, authority to operate? One of the problems that you have is that you're depending upon an RMF process where you have to have overlays for each of the particular components that you have. I mean, Scott mentioned some of those already, that you have an overlay for those particular RMF controls that are resolved by the hardware. But you have to have overlays for the cloud environment per se. You have to have overlays for each of the tools that you have associated with it, and somehow you have to do this quickly. And that's been one of the problems, is how fast can you actually do this? And then you also have to have a securities provider that's going to watch what's going on.
Sure, excellent. Excellent points.
Challenges, they're challenges.
Absolutely. Ralph Liberati, what do you think are some of the challenges, the hard things to get done?
Absolutely. The Defense Intelligence Agency is part of the IC, and we support the Defense and
Right.
the DoD. So we're the bridge between the IC and the DoD. In our environment, we have challenges with respect to having the cloud providers at the right security enclaves. We do have a partnership, and we have one with Amazon at the TS level. That's one facility. But we're also looking to partnership with the IC's partnering with Microsoft to increase the Azure and the Office 360 at the TS level. And we're also looking with Amazon to increase at the secret level. So having those facilities at the right security enclaves available and ready for us to use and transition our applications into has been a challenge. And additionally, we run and maintain many of these applications at varying security levels. So being able to have them running with the same configuration, the same software code baselines at those different security enclaves has been a challenge. So in some cases, at one level we'll have it at one version, and at another level we'll have it at another one, which adds complexity and
version
aggravation.
control.
So we're looking very much into the future, and by the end of this calendar year, we hope to have another Amazon facility, and hopefully by middle of FY19, possibly we'll have that Amazon or that Microsoft Azure and Office 360 available for us to use.
Yeah, excellent points. This security, I never focused on it that much, but you need cleared people, you need cleared facilities, you need constant monitoring and oversight. Excellent points. John Hale, what are some of the challenges or the tough things that to get where you want to be with all these programs?
Well, I think the big ones have already been mentioned, right? So number one, contracting. We talk about contracting for cloud within the DoD. It's still being the Wild West. A DoD mission partner will come to me and I have these applications and I want to move them to a commercial cloud capability. My answer is usually like, well, here's a business card for a couple sales guys. Give them a call, hook up a contract, and then come back and talk to me.
Yeah. Well, it's a different model, I mean, it's not contracting like we did traditionally. This is a different thing.
So the good news there is, and I was talking to Scott about this before we started the show, is there's a new organization within the department called the CESG, the Cloud Enterprise Steering Group, and one of their efforts is really to create this new blanket vehicle where you'll be able to buy commercial cloud within the department as a service. And so the RFI for that hit the street last week, and there's going to be an RFP that's going to come out later about that. But that's really going to help, hopefully, solve the how do we buy commercial cloud capabilities within the department. And to piggyback on what Ralph was talking about, the IC has done some really good work with working with the commercial cloud providers for on-prem cloud capabilities,
right,
and virtual on-prem, however you want to define it, at the TSS levels. But we battle with the IC on a constant basis, not in a bad way, and it's really more about the color money, right? So we get into this whole Title 50, Title 10. They have contracts with commercial cloud providers that we can't leverage because where our money comes from, and it goes back to it's it's something that Congress has to solve, honestly.
Absolutely.
Because
there's a lot of examples of that, by the way, when I was in there. I mean, let's go to teleworking, we can save all this money. Well, there's different pockets of money there, there's, or let's do something to reduce travel. Well, the travel budget, IT money and travel money are different. IT money and telecommuting money are different. So, but continue, but you're making some good points there.
And we're getting visibility at the AT&L and the senior leadership level within the DoD that there is a cost in migrating applications to the cloud, and so we're starting in the finance cycle. We're starting to see emphasis on money dedicated towards migrating applications to the cloud. So that's a good news. But those have been the challenges. It's really been contractual and budget. Much of what Mr. K talked about.
Yeah.
So.
I want to hear from our industry partners on the challenges also, but before we do that, we're going to take another short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik, along with Frank Konieczny from the U.S. Air Force, John Hale from DISA, Ralph Liberati from DIA, Tom Simmons from Citrix, AJ LaForty from BMC Software, and Scot Susi from Nutanix Federal. We're talking defense cloud. We've talked about progress. We've talked about programs. We've talked about lessons learned. And we were talking about challenges. We heard from our government panelists, but let's hear from the industry side of that. Let's start with AJ LaForty over BMC. AJ, what are some of the challenges that you face trying to help get your customers to where they want to be?
Yeah, there's two key challenges that I'd like to look at and talk
Okay.
about. And the first one being is legacy applications. The DoD has a lot of legacy applications that are truly supporting the mission. They're extremely vital to what's going on, but you cannot just lift and shift them to the cloud. It's not that simple. There's some things the code needs to be written, some things we need to look at potentially retiring applications, replacing them, and doing things along those lines. So there's a lot of thought process that comes to moving a lot of these legacy applications. The next thing is really looking at, we're moving to the cloud, and Mr. K already mentioned that if I was to look at, if I quote him right, if I was to look at all the services in the Air Force, I'd spend more time trying to find them.
Yeah, right.
Well, the issue that we're actually looking at now is, okay, we're moving everything to the cloud. How do I make sure that I continue to track everything I have in the cloud? So that way 2-3 years from now, I'm not saying, well, all my stuff's in the cloud, but I really don't know what I have out there. So being able to truly identify and understand every single service being operated and run and managed and maintained in the cloud, and being able to track that moving forward. So as we're moving along this cloud journey, we want to be able to help our customers understand everything they've moved to the cloud, understand the layout and design, and then that way 2 years from now, they can at any time look back and say, here's my cloud and here's everything that we currently have in it.
It's like a roadmap with milestones along the way to track where you're going and know when you got there. Scot Susi, Nutanix, what are some of the challenges you see in working your way to support your customers getting there?
So one of the hardest things that we found is how do we add additional complexity into the services that we provide and hide that complexity from the consumer. So one of the biggest lures of moving to a commercial cloud is, as advances are made, you go up to a website and there's a new drop-down list box or a new radio button. There's something that it's very easy to consume. When you try to do the same thing on-prem, and when you're building your own cloud, you have to install a new piece of hardware. You've got a new tool to manage it, or several tools to manage it. The difficult part of that is something that we wrestle with, is how do we reduce the complexity and provide those capabilities with a one-click? And that's exactly what we're doing. It takes a lot of effort in order to make something look simple. It's just like consuming things on the iPhone. It's not an easy problem that's happened, but Apple makes it look very simple to the consumer. You just download an application. So,
and I think that's where the expectations are these days. That you should be able to just hit a button, come up, and intuitively know exactly what you have to do. If I have to read the manual, forget it. I'm not buying that product. Tom Simmons, what do you think in terms of challenges, things that are, tough things to get to where you want to go.
I think, again, with an application-based focus, a lot of the things that we see as challenges have already been mentioned, but I'd like to drill down on just the interdependencies a little bit more. I think what we're seeing, in step one, moving an application from being hosted in a data center to hosted in a cloud. The dependencies, what other applications does that one rely on to get the job done? Something as simple as authenticating to that application. Where do the certificates live? How do I get a path to the authentication database back to then the application, and then from the application to the data that supports the app? That time and distance problem is something that's very real in physical data centers, and in our history of managing that thing over the last 30 years, we are seeing that same kind of issue as we migrate to the cloud. Data, application, associated applications, authentication databases, all of those create paths across networks, and those paths have varying distances. And the user, if not properly managed, will suffer from a performance perspective. In some cases, central IT will lose visibility into what the user is doing from a device into a SaaS application or a cloud resource if it's not funneled through a cloud portal or a centralized digital workspace. So the challenges associated with making sure that the application and all of its dependencies are accounted for in a migration to the cloud is probably the biggest one that we've seen.
Yeah, excellent points. Excellent points. We're at the part of the show where we want to take a look to the future. Where is this all going? What's this all going to mean down the road? I mean, is it going to change the way we do things, government does things? It's going to change the environments we're managing. What does this mean down the road? So let's talk about the future, where we're going. Let's start with John Hale over at DISA. John, what's this all mean to us down the road? What's going to be different in the future?
Well, so it's interesting. So when we started the show, there was a joke earlier about the making everything as a service.
Yeah.
And the push, the Internet of Things, the IoT movement of, everything's becoming a sensor. The amount of data that's coming onto the network is just mind-boggling in today's world. Years ago when we started having the discussions about cloud, what kind of got cloud's foot in the door was cost, right? It was all about, move your stuff to the cloud, you're going to save lots of money.
Right.
Over the years, that message has changed, and it's more now about creating better functionality, right? Elasticity, economies of scale, agility. Those kind of words are really what sells cloud today. But where we're seeing more and more push from our DoD mission partners is less about what we've traditionally called cloud and more towards SaaS, right? So software as a service is really where most DoD mission partners are pushing for capabilities,
right,
because it goes back to the cost factor, right?
Sure.
So when they move to SaaS models, they don't even have to have expertise in that particular area of the business. And it goes back to the use case of the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Army, whatever. Is it their responsibility to have soldiers, sailors, and airmen who are Windows system administrators?
Right.
Or should those soldiers, sailors, and airmen be focused on the mission?
Yeah.
Right?
I
and so
that word down listening to you, mission. Focus
yeah,
on
so
mission.
so by leveraging software as a service, you can then free up those same soldiers, sailors, and airmen to focus on the mission and less about,
how do I
IT stuff.
Get my password fixed. Tom Simmons, Citrix. What's the future look like to you, Tom?
So I think as we look to the future and the benefits of computing, whether cloud delivered or a survival of a physical data center, the whole concept centers around a secure digital workspace. And so a Citrix vision of the future would be every sailor, soldier, airman that comes in, when they're issued all of their other gear, including a CAC card, they're also issued a secure digital workspace. This is a place in the cloud where they have a button for anything and everything that they need to have access to. That button might appear in a workspace inside the environment, inside the firewall with 50 buttons. But as I access it from my iPhone or as I access it from my thin client laptop, instead of 50 buttons, I might only see 15. The difference being, what do I know about the scenario? What do I know about the device and my ability to secure the data transmission and the footprint that's left on that device after I do my job? So the flexibility the cloud offers, we can create this hosted workspace, whether you want to call it a desktop or just a storefront or an app store. The concept there is I have access to everything that I need to do my job, that everything is a service concept that you talked about before. Software as a service obviously is an important part of that, but the other infrastructure things, where's my storage? Where's my centralized unified communications capability? So having this secure digital workspace assigned to everybody gives us the ability to be flexible, work from anywhere, that concept, but it also keeps IT in the oversight role, so I can see what people are doing, and I can see what people on the outside are trying to do and prevent them from getting in.
Great. Scott, Susi, Nutanix, what future look like for you?
So one of the things we hear time and time again from DoD tactical customers is there are all these single-use tactical application stacks out in the field that have no connectivity back to the cloud. And so they're looking for a way to take advantage of more of the capabilities that the cloud provides with machine learning, with artificial intelligence. So essentially, you know, there's so many things that are being done right now commercially. Come back to the Tesla example, you know, where Internet of Things that John mentioned, that there are all these sensors out there on every single one of these vehicles. There's a lot of processing that's actually done on the vehicle itself to help with autonomous driving. But some of that data is rolled back to the cloud so it can be pushed out to all of the endpoints. Those same types of things and capabilities have to happen on the battlefield with the tactical application stacks.
Yeah, talking about the cars, you know, I saw something, I think it was Ford's strategic plan. The value of the technology that goes in the car will be far greater than the value of the car itself. AJ, LaForty, what does the future look like to you, AJ?
To me, it's really an automated world when we look at the place where we're at in the DoD, is the capability for provisioning, security, patching, compliance management. All of these functionalities are going to be automated. So there's going to be people off keyboards and the ability for the tools to actually maintain and suffice themselves. There's a lot of things going on, as mentioned, as we're talking about with the Internet of Things and all that stuff, and bringing everything together and tying everything together. And really, it's being able to automate those functionality, automate all that capability, ensuring our security. I know I say security a lot, but to me, it's
come up
such
on
a
every
key.
topic, and it should.
It's such a key focus because
Absolutely.
of everything that we see in the news that's happening over the last year. We can't afford for anyone in the DoD to let that happen, and we just, you know, I see this being a continued automated capabilities moving forward in the DoD.
Excellent, continuous processes. Ralph Liberati, what's the future look like to you, Ralph? Where's this all going?
That's a great question, and we're blessed at DIA. We have some great IT strategic thinkers, and we've been mulling this over the last couple of weeks. And we understand that the infrastructure is going to change. You know, we're going to be pulling our services from cloud providers, and application development will change. But we honestly believe it's all about the data. The data is the key. The Internet of Things is out there. There's sensors everywhere, as John had mentioned. There's all this data coming in from various sources and places. What can we do to leverage that data, put artificial intelligence on top of it, and machine learning languages and capabilities to be able to take that data and turn it into intelligence so that we can predict and know what our adversaries are up to? So at the Defense Intelligence Agency, I clearly can tell you that our leadership really believes that it's all about the data in the future.
Absolutely, that song comes to mind. All about the data, about the data, about the data. All about that base thing, you know. It's all about that data. Frank Konieczny, Frank, what do you think? Where's this going? What's the future look like?
The end result that we always want is mission resiliency. And that's through the handling of surges, as well as the capability to dynamically move from one cloud to another if one cloud comes under duress. And we anticipate that's going to occur. We actually talked about having a COOP cloud that would actually store data that we'd have out in one of the other clouds, and then we can automatically change
I like
to
that.
the COOP cloud.
Coop for the cloud.
COOP for the cloud, because you can't be sure of everything that's going to happen. So you have to take contingency plans. But as we go towards the goal of mission resiliency, you have to look at it from the viewpoint of, okay, what else do I need to have? I want to have automation. AJ mentioned this already. We need more and more automation all the time. You just can't, if you think about moving one application to the cloud, it's easy. If I want to move 100 applications to a cloud, to multiple clouds, and they all interconnect to each other and they talk to each other, and I have security on top of this, how do I do that? You have to have automation to do this. This is a very complex issue now. People think, oh, I just stick it in an enclave. It doesn't work that way in the cloud. You just don't have an enclave in the cloud that you can stick this stuff into. Security is foremost in this, and so we want to have an automated auto-provisioning way of doing this, but also an understanding that I'm auto-provisioning across multiple clouds now. And I have to understand how I link them all together with the security profile that I have. And on top of that, you know, Ralph mentioned this too. What do I have on top of this for machine intelligence, for auto analytics, to actually look at all the attack surfaces I now
Sure.
have across all my clouds as to what I look at?
Right.
And lastly, you want to do this fast. You want to do this in terms of DevOps, a model that you can do. We're trying to actually have a process that will let you automatically get ATO within a day, depending on the chain that you have to go through, the controls that you have to go through when you actually release a new item into the production side. And so that's our goal, is ATO in a day, through
ATO
DevOps,
in a day, I love that.
through DevOps, through a secure environment that we also have.
Well, I like the fact the goal. It's sort of like, you know, man on the moon, ATO in a day. It's keep it out there, and eventually we'll get there. Well, I'm going to make an attempt here to do some summaries. We had some fantastic content here, another great knowledge sharing session. Thank you all for keep making me smarter again, because one of the things I love about the show is I get to hear from a lot of smart people every time we do it, and you guys help keep me smart. So let's talk about some of the highlights here. We did talk about progress. You know, we talked about everything as a service, but I think software as a service is the one that came out strong in terms of being done pretty much across the board. I was impressed to hear that classified programs are actually making it to the cloud, because I know over the years people have said, well, the administrative stuff will go right away, but it'll be a long time. So it's good to hear that those hurdles are being jumped over also. We heard security right across the board with pretty much every question we asked, and it came right out with the progress that we're getting better and better with the security stuff. I heard about less administrative burden, less administrators going to be needed in the cloud environment compared to environments we have today. And of course, we heard from DISA about being an actual provider. It's kind of a hybrid approach where it's commercial cloud to the agencies, but actually housed behind the fence at DISA in a secure environment. When we talked about specific programs, we heard about the better monitoring and a lot of Intel programs. I loved cloud it or kill it. I thought that was a great line as a way to a goal to move forward. We heard about the Air Ops centers. We heard about service hosted environments for everyone. You know, try to have an environment that can host everyone. And we heard a lot about not boil the ocean. We need to do this in steps and pieces, small chunks, get some success stories, build some momentum, go forward. When we talked about some of the lessons being learned, we talked about the need for a portfolio of applications and doing that upfront work to get the inventories known so you can break it down, kind of like a software engineering process, to determine which programs can go to the cloud, which ones are ready, which ones do we need, which ones maybe we don't need anymore. So there's upfront work that has to be done, and it takes time. It's time intensive, but yet it's going to help down the road in the long run. We talked about partnerships being important and profiles being laid out, security profiles, but and the need for your partners to be made. What drove home on lessons and what I really took away is it's really business decision making. It's not about technology is important, but we need to make good business decisions here as to what we're going to do going forward. And when we talked about challenges, procurement, acquisition, contracting jumped right out, as I kind of knew it would. It always does when you're talking about doing things a little bit different, or models that are slightly different than the way we always did it. Causes some challenges there. We talked about the budget, and the budgeting for cloud's a little different than traditional budgeting. We talked about the need for speed. These things need to move fast, and as the workforce, younger workforce comes in to the government, they're going to expect speed. We talked about the need to look at the legacy apps. There's a lot of old legacy apps out there that are a real challenge. What are you going to do with them? You don't want to move a legacy app over as is. And interdependencies came up. When we talked about vision, we said focus on mission. We talked about everything as a service, as a direction. We talked about a secure digital workspace for everyone. Frank brought up resiliency and the need for COOP kinds of operations. And we talked about better government services, and in my mind, sort of a safer country for our generation and generations to come. With that, I need to thank our panelists for taking time from their busy days to be here and share your viewpoints with us and our audience. Thank the sponsors, without which we don't have a show. Thank the good people here at Federal News Radio who do such a great job with what they do. Thanks to Trezza Media for the work he puts in to making sure everything goes smoothly. And most importantly, thanks to the listeners that tune in each month and listen to our show. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.